The sky had already darkened long before the clock said evening. Thick gray clouds pressed low over the city, trapping the heat and the noise and the unspoken tension of a place that never truly rested. Emma stood just inside the glass doors of the building, her reflection staring back at her faint and tired, as rain began to streak down the windows in heavy, uneven lines. Her first week at the firm had drained her in ways she had not expected. The work itself was intense but manageable. What unsettled her was the atmosphere. Everything about the place felt powerful and secretive. Doors that required extra clearance. Meetings that ended the moment she entered a room. Men in tailored suits who spoke in quiet voices and looked through people rather than at them. It was a finance firm on paper, but it carried the weight of something else, something she could not yet name. Emma adjusted the strap of her worn bag on her shoulder and exhaled slowly. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her mind refused to rest. Numbers still flickered behind her eyes. Projections, risk curves, accounts that never quite behaved the way logic said they should. She reminded herself that this job mattered. It was not just a stepping stone or a line on a resume. It was survival. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from her mother, short and careful as always. Her younger brother needed new school books. Prices had gone up again. Emma closed her eyes for a brief moment, the familiar weight settling in her chest. She loved her family fiercely, but carrying them on her shoulders left little room for anyone else in her life. Friendships had faded. Relationships had never truly begun. There was no time for softness when responsibility demanded everything. Outside, the rain worsened. People hurried past with coats pulled tight, umbrellas bending under the wind. Emma glanced toward the street, calculating her options. 2 buses and a long walk through flooded sidewalks, or a taxi she could not really afford. She hesitated, torn between comfort and conscience. That was when the black car pulled up. It moved with quiet precision, gliding to the curb as if it had been waiting for the exact moment she looked up. Sleek and immaculate, its dark surface reflected the city lights in soft, distorted patterns. Emma assumed it belonged to someone important inside the building. Maybe an executive leaving late, maybe security. She stepped aside instinctively, making space. The window lowered smoothly. The man behind the wheel did not rush or gesture. He simply looked at her. His gaze was steady, unreadable. Rain dotted his dark hair, but he did not seem bothered by it. There was something calm about him, something controlled, as if the storm existed separately from where he stood. "You work here?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded. "Yes, I just finished for the day." He did not smile, did not explain. He reached across and unlocked the passenger door. The click sounded louder than it should have. For a second, Emma hesitated. Every instinct told her to be cautious. But the rain soaked through her jacket, and the street felt suddenly hostile and far away. This was clearly a company car. She assumed he was a driver sent to collect staff who stayed late. It made sense. Powerful places always had systems like that. "Thank you," she said as she climbed in. "I really appreciate it." The door closed with a soft, solid sound that shut out the rain entirely. The interior was warm and quiet. Leather seats. A faint scent of something expensive and unfamiliar. Emma felt underdressed, underprepared, but she pushed the feeling aside. "Where are you headed?" he asked, pulling smoothly back into traffic. "Riverside District," she replied. "It is a bit far. I was going to take the bus." He nodded once, eyes on the road. The city lights reflected in them briefly, sharp and pale. He did not comment on the distance, did not complain, did not ask for anything in return. Emma relaxed without realizing she had been tense. "Thank you again," she said. "It has been a long week." "First week?" he asked. "Yes," she smiled faintly. "Intense, but I am grateful. Jobs like this do not come easily." He listened, really listened. Not the polite nodding she was used to, but attentive silence. Emma found herself talking more than she intended. About her work, about her family, about how she was trying to prove herself in a place that felt larger and darker than anything she had known before. He never corrected her assumption, never said he was anything other than what she believed him to be. He accepted her kindness without claiming authority, accepted her words without judgment. As the rain beat harder against the windshield, A quiet question lingered beneath the moment. Why would a man like this allow himself to be mistaken for someone ordinary? Emma did not know it yet, but the mistake she had made in the rain was about to change everything. The car moved through the rain like it belonged to the night itself, quiet, steady, unhurried. As if the storm had no authority over it, Emma watched the city slide past the window her shoulders, slowly easing for the first time that evening. She did not realize how tense she had been until the silence wrapped around her like something protective. He drove with complete control, one hand resting lightly on the wheel, the other relaxed near the console. There was no wasted movement, no distraction, no music filling the space, only the low hum of the engine. And the rain drumming against glass. Emma noticed it, without knowing why. A driver who did not glance at his phone, who did not rush, who did not seem nervous under pressure. It was strange how comfortable it felt. "You must see a lot of tired people," he said. After a while, his voice calm, almost thoughtful. Emma gave a small laugh. "Yes, I guess so. Everyone in that building looks like they are carrying something heavy." He nodded as if that confirmed something he already knew. Power like that always has a cost. She looked at him, then surprised by the comment. It sounded nothing like small talk, more like experience speaking. But she did not question it. Instead, she answered honestly, "I think so too. I just hope the cost is worth it." "What makes it worth it for you?" he asked. Emma hesitated. No one ever asked her questions like that. Usually people waited for their turn to speak or offered advice. She had not asked for, but he waited patiently, eyes forward, voice neutral, giving her space to choose. "My family," she said finally. "My father cannot work anymore. My mother tries. But it is not enough. My brother is still in school, so I work, I plan, I make it work." "You sound very certain," he said. "I have to be," she replied softly. "If I stop being certain, everything falls apart." The car slowed briefly at a red light, rainwater pooling along the curb, reflections dancing across the dark hood. Emma studied his profile, sharp, composed, unreadable. There was something distant in him, something that did not quite belong in a driver's seat. "Do you ever get tired of taking care of everyone?" he asked. The question hit deeper than she expected. Emma swallowed. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but it does not matter. People depend on me." The light turned green, and the car moved again, smooth and controlled. "That kind of responsibility changes a person," he said. "It teaches you discipline, but it also teaches you loneliness." Emma felt a small chill despite the warmth inside the car. "That sounds like you know from experience." He did not answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. "Perhaps everyone has their burdens. Some are just hidden better than others." She wanted to ask more, but something in his tone suggested boundaries, lines he would not cross, not yet. So she spoke instead, about work, about how the firm felt different from anywhere she had been before, how people whispered, how meetings stopped when doors opened, how everything felt layered with secrets. "Does that bother you?" he asked. "A little," she admitted, "but I am here to work, not to ask questions. I believe if I do my job well, that will be enough." "For most people," he said carefully, "it never is." She frowned, turning toward him. "Why say that?" "Because power rarely rewards innocence," he replied, and then just as quickly added, "but it should." That made her smile despite the unease. "Well, I am hoping this place is different." He glanced at her, then a look so brief, she almost missed it, something like admiration, something like regret. "Hope is a dangerous thing," he said, "but without it nothing ever changes." Rain struck harder against the windshield, thunder rolling somewhere far above the city. Emma felt the weight of the moment without understanding why she had spoken more in these few minutes than she had in weeks. She felt seen, without being examined, heard, without being judged. She did not notice the way his jaw tightened, the way his grip on the wheel shifted almost imperceptibly, as if he were holding something back. He had accepted her mistake, without correction, her kindness, without question, and with every mile that passed, the decision became heavier. Because for the first time in years, someone had spoken to him without fear, and he was not sure he was ready to let that go. The car slowed in front of her building, rain spilling from the roof in heavy sheets. The street was quiet, almost empty, the kind of silence that settled late at night. When the city finally exhaled, Emma reached for her bag, suddenly aware of how quickly the ride had ended and how strange that made her feel. "Thank you again," she said, turning toward him. "I really appreciate this. You did not have to come so far." He nodded, once it was no trouble. She opened the door, then paused. Rain rushed toward her, the cold biting through her thin jacket. Before she stepped out, something inside her resisted the ending of the moment. She did not know why she felt this way, only that walking away felt unfinished. She closed the door halfway, then looked back at him. "Would you like to come up for coffee as a thank you?" The words surprised even her. She was not impulsive, not reckless. Inviting a stranger into her home was not something she did. But the kindness in his silence, the way he had listened without judgment, made him feel less like a stranger and more like someone she already knew. He studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. The rain traced slow paths down the window beside him. She could see hesitation there, not fear, but calculation, as if he were weighing consequences she could not imagine. Finally, he turned off the engine and opened his door. "Coffee sounds nice," he said. They moved quickly through the rain toward the building entrance. Emma fumbled with her keys, hands cold, heart racing. She felt suddenly nervous, aware of the smallness of her world. Compared to the presence beside her, he followed without comment, his steps light, controlled, as if he knew exactly how much space to take. Inside, they climbed the stairs. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and old paint. Emma apologized out of habit. "It is not much, but it is home." When she opened the door, warm light spilled out, revealing a tiny apartment, neat and lived in. Second-hand furniture, soft blankets, plants on the windowsill, signs of care and effort rather than wealth. He stopped just inside, looking around quietly, not with judgment, but with interest, as if every detail mattered. "Please sit," she said, placing her bag down. "I will make coffee." As she moved through the kitchen, she felt his presence behind her, steady, observant. He did not touch anything, did not invade the space. But she sensed his attention, followed her movements. She realized how rare that was, to be seen without being assessed. "You keep this place very orderly," he said. "Everything has a purpose." "When you have little space, you learn to respect it," she replied. "Also, it helps me think." "That makes sense," he said softly. They sat across from each other, cups warming their hands. The rain continued outside, filling the silence. When it appeared, Emma talked about her childhood, her father. Before he became ill, her mother sewing late into the night, her brother dreaming of a future she was determined to help build. He listened without interrupting, without offering solutions, without pity, and something in her loosened as she spoke, words she had carried alone for too long. "You are very strong," he said, not as praise, but as truth. "I do not feel strong," she admitted. "I just do what needs to be done." "Sometimes that is strength," he replied. She noticed then how little he had shared about himself. Every time she asked, he gently turned the focus back to her. It was subtle, skillful, like someone trained to stay hidden. "You are very good at listening," she said, smiling, "but you never talk about yourself." He met her gaze, something flickering there, something guarded, some truths kept behind locked doors. "Some stories are dangerous," he said quietly, "better left untold." The words sent a chill through her, though his tone remained calm. Emma laughed, lightly, trying to ease the tension. "Maybe you are more mysterious than a driver should be." A faint smile touched his lips, but he said nothing. When he stood to leave, she felt the loss before it happened. He paused at the door, turning back to her. "Tomorrow may feel different," he said. "Remember tonight, remember how we spoke without knowing who we were to each other." She frowned, confused, but before she could ask, he was gone, footsteps fading down the stairs, leaving behind the echo of something she could not yet name. Emma stood alone in her doorway, heart racing, unaware that she had just offered warmth to the most dangerous man in the city, and that he had accepted it, because for the first time in his life, he had been treated as ordinary. Emma barely slept that night. The rain had stopped, but the silence left behind felt louder than the storm ever had. She lay staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening again. And again, the way his voice never rose, the way his eyes seemed to weigh every word, the way he accepted her kindness without claiming it or refusing it. There was something unfinished about the way he left, not rushed, not dramatic, just deliberate, like a door closed gently. But not locked, she kept hearing his words, tomorrow may feel different, remember, tonight. She did not know why they stayed with her, but they did, sinking deep into her thoughts. Morning came too quickly, the city waking with its usual indifference. Emma, dressed carefully, choosing her most professional outfit, pressing the fabric twice, even though it was already neat. She did not understand the nervous energy humming beneath her skin, only that she felt watched by something unseen. On the bus, she caught herself scanning every dark car that passed, every familiar shape, hoping and fearing at the same time to see him again. She told herself, it was foolish, he was just a driver, a stranger who happened to listen, nothing more. Yet her chest tightened when she reached the building and did not see the black car waiting. Inside the firm, the air felt heavier than usual. Conversations stopped. When managers walked past, phones were checked twice, doors closed. Quietly, Emma felt it again, that sense of power moving beneath the surface like an underground current. She shook it off and focused on her work, letting numbers anchor her the way they always did. Mid-morning, an email arrived marked confidential, mandatory meeting attendance. Required. She frowned, her stomach tightening. She was too new for meetings like this. The room filled quickly, faces, tense voices. Lo, then the doors opened. The shift in the air was immediate. Conversations, dyed backs, straightened eyes, lowered. Emma felt it before she saw him, the room reacting as one body to a single presence. He walked in calmly, the same measured steps, the same controlled stillness. But now he was surrounded by men who deferred without speaking, who made space without being asked. He wore a dark suit. Perfectly fitted, his expression unreadable, his gaze sharp and steady. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. It was him. Not a driver, not a stranger, but the man everyone feared, the man whose name was never spoken casually. The man whose decisions shaped careers and lives and consequences, whispered about but never confirmed. Her hands clenched in her lap as understanding crashed over her every word. She had spoken every truth she had offered, every assumption she had made. He had known all along. He took his place at the front of the room and began to speak, his voice calm, commanding. Absolute silence fell as if the walls themselves were listening. Emma could barely hear the words, her pulse thundered in her ears. Then his eyes lifted and found hers. Just for a second. There was no smile, no apology, only recognition. And something else, something restrained, something heavy. He did not look away first. In that moment, Emma understood the warning he had given her. Tomorrow did feel different. The world had shifted its shape, revealing sharp edges she had never seen. When the meeting ended, she tried to disappear into the crowd, but a hand stopped her gently at the door. A man she had never met spoke her name with practiced respect and told her she was expected upstairs. As the elevator rose, Emma stared at the numbers climbing, feeling the weight of the truth settle fully into her chest. She had invited danger into her home. She had poured coffee for power. She had mistaken silence for simplicity. And the man who accepted her kindness without correction had done so knowing exactly what he was risking, and exactly what it would cost her now that the mistake could no longer be undone. The elevator ride felt endless, the soft hum beneath her feet only deepened the tension in her chest. Emma stood perfectly still, hands folded, eyes forward. As the numbers climbed higher than she had ever been before, every floor carried her further away from the version of herself who had offered coffee to a stranger in the rain. When the doors finally opened, the space beyond them felt unreal, quiet, wide, controlled. Men moved with purpose, speaking in low voices, stopping instantly. When they noticed her presence, no one asked her name, no one questioned why she was there. That alone told her everything she needed to know. She was guided to a set of heavy doors and left there alone. The moment stretched before the doors opened without a sound. He stood by the window, hands behind his back, looking out over the city, the same city she had spoken about with hope and exhaustion the night before. Only now, it looked smaller beneath him, like something already owned. "You wanted to see me," Emma said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. He turned slowly, the calm in his face unchanged, but his eyes held something deeper now, something guarded. "Yes," he said simply. The silence between them thickened, filling the room with everything unsaid. Emma felt anger rise sharp. And sudden cutting through her fear, you let me believe you were nothing more than a driver. She said you listened to me speak about my life, my work, my worries, knowing exactly who you were. He did not deny it, I did. Why, she demanded, her hands tightening at her sides. Why would you do that? He moved closer, not threatening, not apologetic, just honest. Because if you had known, you would not have spoken to me like that. You would have measured every word, every glance, every breath. I wanted the truth, Emma, not the performance people give me. She shook her head, disbelief mixing with humiliation. You had no right to put me in that position. You had no right to make me vulnerable. You are right, he said quietly. The admission stunned her. She had expected power, not accountability. Last night, he continued, you treated me like a man, not a title, not a weapon, not a shadow behind closed doors. No one does that anymore. Emma laughed bitterly. Because they are afraid. As they should be, he replied without flinching. The honesty in his voice sent a chill through her. Then why pretend to be harmless, she asked. Because I am tired of being feared, he said, and because for one night I wanted to remember what it felt like to be human. The room felt smaller suddenly, the truth pressing in on her. She realized, then, the danger was not just who he was, but how easily he had let her close. What happens now? Emma asked. He looked at her fully now. No masks, no distance. You will be given a choice. A choice, she echoed. You can walk away from this floor, from this world, and return to your desk, untouched. Or you can step forward based on merit alone into a role that requires strength, honesty, and courage, the same qualities you showed me without knowing who I was. She stared at him, searching for manipulation, and finding none. And if I refuse, she asked. Then I will make sure you leave here safe, he said, and unchanged. The words should have comforted her, but they did not, because she knew now that nothing could undo the mistake. The truth had already rewritten everything. Emma took a slow breath, understanding settling heavy in her chest. She had mistaken power for simplicity and silence for safety. And the man who stood before her had said nothing, not because he was harmless, but because he was dangerous enough to choose restraint. Emma returned to her desk, but nothing felt the same. The screen in front of her glowed, with numbers she could usually command, yet now they blurred into meaninglessness. The office around her moved, as it always had, phones ringing, chairs shifting, quiet conversations. But she felt sealed off from it all, as if a wall of glass now separated her from the rest of the world. She had been offered a choice, but it did not feel like one. Every instinct told her to walk away, to return to anonymity, to safety, to the quiet certainty of rules and boundaries. But another part of her, one she had learned to trust, whispered that running would change nothing. She had already stepped into something far larger than herself, and pretending otherwise would not protect her. By late afternoon, a message appeared on her screen requesting her presence again, this time not from an assistant, but directly from him. Emma stood slowly, smoothing her clothes, not because they needed it, but because she needed the grounding motion as she walked back toward the elevator. Each step felt deliberate, like crossing invisible lines she could no longer uncross. The doors opened to the same quiet floor, but this time she walked alone toward his office and entered without being announced. He was seated behind his desk, now reviewing documents, as if the weight of the morning had never existed. When he looked up, his gaze sharpened, immediately focused entirely on her. You came, he said. I needed clarity, Emma replied, her voice calm despite the tension coiled inside her. I do not want favors. I do not want protection that costs me my integrity. He leaned back, slightly studying her, as though she were a puzzle worth solving. You would have to be very brave to stand here and say that. I am not brave, she said. I am careful. Sometimes, he replied, they look the same from the outside. She took a breath, then spoke the words she had been holding in since morning. You listened to me last night. You heard who I am now. I need to know who you are, not the title, not the rumors, not the fear. Something shifted in his expression, not anger, not surprise, but respect. I am a man who learned very early that power keeps people alive, he said. I am also a man who learned too late that it keeps them distant. Emma felt the weight of that truth settle between them. The work this firm does, he continued, it exists because the world is not kind. I control chaos, So it does not spill everywhere else. That is the part people fear. And the part you hide, she asked quietly. He looked at her longer this time, the silence stretching but not breaking. The part that wanted to stay in your apartment last night, listening to stories about a life untouched by violence. He said the part that almost forgot who I am supposed to be. Emma swallowed. You should have told me. I know, he replied, but if I had, you would never have opened the door. She nodded slowly, accepting that truth, even as it unsettled her. Then tell me this, she said. If I step forward, if I accept whatever this role is, will I be owned? His answer came without hesitation. No, you will never belong to me. You will belong to yourself, or you will not be here at all. The certainty in his voice steadied her more than promises ever could. Emma straightened then. I will consider it, she said, but only on one condition. He waited. You never lie to me again, she said. Silence is one thing, deception is another. For the first time since she met him, he smiled, not the faint, controlled expression from before, but something genuine, something rare. That may be the most dangerous request anyone has ever made of me, he said, but I accept. Emma turned to leave, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with resolve. Behind her, he watched, knowing the line she had drawn would change not only her future, but his as well. The days that followed moved differently, as if time itself had shifted its pace. Emma accepted the role quietly, without announcement, without ceremony. She was moved into a smaller, secured division, where access was limited, and conversations were careful. The work was deeper, heavier, patterns beneath patterns, money flows that revealed intent, not just numbers. She understood quickly. This was not just finance, it was control. Emma worked harder than she ever had before, not because she was afraid, but because she refused to be reduced to a rumor or a mistake. She stayed late, double-checked, everything questioned, assumptions. Her focus became armor. He kept his distance. In meetings, his voice was professional, restrained, his eyes never lingered too long. Yet she felt him everywhere, in the pauses, before decisions, in the way. Rooms went silent when he entered, in the way. People stepped aside without realizing they were doing it. They did not speak alone for days. And yet the tension grew. It lived in the moments no one noticed, when he asked for her analysis first, when he waited for her nod, before approving a direction, when his gaze hardened. If someone interrupted her mid-sentence, it was subtle but unmistakable. Others noticed too. Emma began to feel eyes on her, whispers cut short. When she entered rooms, glances that lingered too long. She understood the danger of perception in this world. Perception could become accusation, and accusation could become threat. One evening, as she prepared to leave, her screen flickered, then went dark. A message appeared briefly, then vanished. Her heart stilled. She stood slowly, instinct telling her not to react. A shadow moved behind her. Do not turn around, he said quietly. Her breath caught, but she did not scream, did not panic. She trusted the voice more than the situation. There are people watching you now, he continued. Not everyone here accepts restraint. Emma closed her eyes, briefly steadying herself. What does that mean? It means you are no longer invisible, he said, and invisibility is safety in my world. She finally turned. He stood a few steps away, expression controlled, but his jaw was tight, his hands clenched behind his back. Then why bring me into it? She asked, not accusing, just honest. Because you see things others ignore, he replied, and because I trusted you before I trusted anyone else. The words settled heavy between them. You cannot protect me forever, Emma said. No, he answered softly, and that is what terrifies me. For the first time she saw it, fear not for himself, but for her, and she understood the line they were walking. Restraint was not distance, it was discipline. If you want me safe, she said, then teach me how to survive here. His gaze sharpened, resolve replacing hesitation. Very well, he said, but know this, once you learn, there is no returning to innocence. Emma met his eyes, unflinching. Then I already lost that the night I opened my door to a stranger in the room. Something in him broke and rebuilt all at once. From that moment forward they moved as allies, bound by silence, by trust, by something deeper neither dared name yet. The most dangerous phase had begun not when desire surfaced, but when it was restrained and watched by those who waited for it to fail. The night everything shifted arrived without warning, the building was nearly empty, lights, dimmed halls, echoing with the sound of distant systems. Humming, Emma sat alone, reviewing a sequence of transactions that refused to align. The numbers told a story, but not one meant to be seen by many, and certainly not by her. She felt it before she understood it, that sense of pressure, the quiet tightening in the air that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with awareness. "You should not be here this late," he said from the door. Emma did not turn immediately, her fingers resting lightly on the desk. "I could say the same to you." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, not locking it, but sealing them away from the rest of the floor. The light caught his face, sharp, calm, controlled, yet something underneath was different. "You found something," he said. She nodded slowly. "There is a pattern buried deep in the accounts. Someone is moving assets in a way that bypasses every safeguard you built." His eyes darkened. "Then you should not have been able to see that." Emma finally faced him. "Then maybe that is the problem." Silence stretched heavy between them. He crossed the room, stopping a careful distance away, close enough that she could feel the gravity of him without being touched. "This puts you in danger," he said quietly. "I already am," she replied, "just by knowing who you are, just by being here." His jaw tightened. "I never wanted this for you." Emma studied him, the man who commanded rooms, with a glance, the man whose name was spoken in whispers and fear, yet now stood before her burdened by something far more human. "Why did you really stay silent that night?" she asked, not the calculated answer, the truth. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his voice was lower. "Because you treated me like someone who did not need to dominate to exist. Because you saw me without armor, and I was weak enough to let you." The admission stole her breath. "You call that weakness?" "In my world," he said, "it is fatal." Emma took a step closer, breaking the space between them. "Then why are you standing here now?" "Because every instinct tells me to push you away," he said, "and every other part of me refuses." Her heart raced, the tension coiled tight. And aching, this was the moment she had been fighting since the rain, the moment restraint cracked. "I am scared," Emma said the words, shaking loose. "I am scared of what knowing you means, of what staying means, of what leaving would do to both of us." He looked at her, then really looked at her, not as an asset, not as a risk, but as the woman who had changed the shape of his silence. "I have done terrible things," he said. "I have ordered men to disappear. I have chosen power over mercy more times than I can count. I am not safe to love." Emma reached out, stopping just short of touching him. "Then, do not protect me from the truth. Protect me from lies." Something broke then, not loudly, not violently, but completely. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a breath. "I have never loved anyone." Her eyes burned, but she did not look away. "Then love me right," she said, "not as possession, not as control." He lifted his hand, hesitating at her cheek, as if asking permission without words. When she leaned into it, the restraint finally gave way. Their kiss was not desperate. It was slow, careful, filled with everything they had denied: fear, longing, choice. When they pulled apart, their foreheads rested together, breathing uneven. "This changes everything," he said. "Yes," Emma replied, "but it finally makes sense." Outside, the city slept, unaware that the most dangerous man within it had just chosen love over silence, and that choice would demand a reckoning neither of them could yet see coming. Everything unraveled faster than Emma expected. Once the silence between them was broken, the danger that had lingered in shadows stepped forward, without apology. Whispers turned into movement, loyalty into fracture, and trust into currency traded behind closed doors. It began with absence, one chair empty, in a meeting that should never be unattended, one report delayed, without explanation. Emma felt it immediately. The numbers shifted again, not subtly this time, but aggressively, like a warning carved into data. Someone was accelerating their plan. She brought the findings to him late at night, the building quiet once more. But now the silence felt hostile instead of intimate. He read, without interruption, his face unreadable, but his body tense, every line drawn tight. "They are forcing my hand," he said finally. Emma felt her chest tighten. "What does that mean?" It means they believe you are my weakness, he replied, and in my world weakness is an invitation. The words chilled her, but she did not step back then. Let me leave, she said, let me disappear until this passes. His eyes snapped to her sharp. No, you will not be punished for my choice. This was your world, Emma pressed, and I walked into it knowing the risk. He shook his head. Slowly you walked into a lie, I brought you into truth. Alarms sounded, then distant but unmistakable movement. Echoing through the building, his phone buzzed. Once he glanced at it, then set it down without answering. They are testing me, he said. If I choose the organization over you, they will retreat. If I choose you, they will strike. Emma stepped closer, her voice steady. Then choose. He looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing her face. The calm in his eyes deepened into something final. I already have, he said. Within hours, the structure shifted, orders reversed, alliances broken quietly, decisively. He dismantled key operations, froze, accounts exposed traitors to their own greed without blood, without spectacle, power used not to dominate, but to contain. The city would never know how close it came to chaos. By dawn, the threat collapsed not because it was crushed, but because it was starved. He had sacrificed profit, influence, and fear, the tools that once defined him. When it was over, he stood alone in the office, city light spilling in through the windows. Emma entered slowly, unsure what she would find. He turned to her, his expression stripped bare. I chose you over the empire. Emma felt tears rise. You did not have to destroy everything. I did not, he said. I destroyed what did not deserve to survive. She stepped into his arms, feeling the weight lift. Even as the future grew uncertain, what happens now, she asked. Now, he said softly, I build something different. Weeks passed, the organization reshaped itself, quieter, cleaner, less visible. Emma stayed not as a shield or symbol, but as a partner, her insight guiding decisions, her presence anchoring him when old instincts surfaced. The most powerful shift was not external, it was internal. He no longer ruled through silence and fear. He ruled through restraint and choice. One evening, he drove her again, not in the rain this time, but in clear night air, to the same building, the same steps, the same door where everything began. He stopped and turned to her, opening the door the same way he had that first night, but now she understood the meaning behind it. This time, the silence was not a mask, it was a vow. The stairwell smelled the same as it always had, faint detergent, damp, concrete. A trace of rust, time had not softened it. But memory had. Emma stood beside him on the narrow landing, heart beating not with fear this time, but with recognition. This place held the beginning of everything, before power, before truth, before love demanded courage. He looked different now, not weaker, not smaller, but unburdened, the sharp edges softened by choice. Rather than surrender, the city no longer pressed against him. Like a crown of obligation, it waited instead. This is where you thought I was nothing, he said quietly. Emma smiled and shook her head. No, this is where I thought you were human. Something passed through his eyes, gratitude, humility, something dangerous in a man like him. He reached into his coat, slowly, deliberately, giving her time to pull away. If she wanted to, she did not. When he lowered himself onto one knee, the world seemed to hold its breath, the echo of the stairwell magnifying the moment, until it felt unreal. Emma, he said, voice steady, though his hands trembled, you opened your door to a stranger and changed the course of my life. You taught me that power without love is emptiness, that silence can be a weapon or a sanctuary, and that restraint is not weakness but choice. Her eyes filled, she pressed her hand to her mouth. I built an empire by controlling fear, he continued, but I found peace when you treated me as equal, when you believed I was worthy of kindness. Without knowing who I was, I do not want a world where you must survive alone anymore. I want a world we choose together. He opened the box. The ring caught the dim light, simple, elegant, unassuming, like the promise it carried. Will you stand beside me, not as protection, not as possession, but as my partner? Tears spilled freely. Now Emma nodded yes, she whispered yes. He rose, pulling her into his arms, the stairwell, holding their quiet laughter, their shared breath, the sound of two lives, choosing each other fully, without illusion. The days that followed were not easy rumors, spread questions, sharpened old enemies watched, but none could touch what had already been rebuilt from the inside out. Their union was not announced with spectacle, it was acknowledged with clarity. He stepped back from operations that thrived on fear, transferring control, dismantling what no longer aligned with the man he had become. Emma remained at his side, not hidden, not elevated, but respected. She was never introduced as leverage, never used as shield. She was known for her mind, her steadiness, her refusal to bend when bending would have been easier. Their wedding was small, intentional, held in quiet light, her family present, his world, kept at a distance by design. He spoke vows without title, without power, thanking her for seeing him when he had hidden behind silence. As they danced, Emma looked up at him, smiling. "Do you ever regret not correcting me that night?" He shook his head. "Never. You did not mistake me, you revealed me." The city outside continued to breathe, to rush, to chase power, and noise, unaware that the most dangerous man within it had learned that love did not begin in dominance, but in silence, and that sometimes the greatest act of strength was opening a door and choosing to be known.